If you don't know me, my name is Gene Ligman. I am Suntour, right? So I'm an independent engineer. I dug into freeze drying. I started about 7 years ago while I was still working for Leibold Corporation. So Leibold is one of the world's top vacuum pump suppliers. Almost all the commercial freeze dryers in the market right now have Leibold pumps on them. I don't mean the small freeze dryers, but I mean all the really big commercial freeze dryers. They really are a good pump. But while I was there, I went out and talked to customers who are out in the field, and they said, I got like lots of questions. One was, do you know how this system works, how this freeze dryer works? And the other one was, do you know anyone that makes a good freeze dryer? And the answer to both questions was no. So I went back to my office. I'm an engineer. And I started to do a deep dive on freeze drying. And the more I learned, the more fascinating it was. So there's actually a lot that's going on in freeze drying. Just about every major vacuum supply equipment company at one point in its history has made and sold freeze dryers. Leibold did, Stokes did, Edwards did, Pfeiffer did, Ulvac did. They all made freeze dryers, and none of them do now. None of them do now. And the reason is because they said, well, it's just vacuum chamber with heated shells. How hard can it be? See, and that's the kind of attitude that gets you in trouble with freeze dryers because there's a lot more going on there. We'll talk all about, so by the way, I set up this, or I picked this topic before I knew that just about everyone's doing this topic. So I'm going to try to just keep this part short so we can do a Ask Me Anything session, right? So if you've seen my YouTube channel, you know that I can answer just about any question that has to do with freeze drying or vacuum technology. And if I don't know the answer to your question, that's even better because that's how I learn. So, for maintenance, how the system works, how do you program it to make it, optimize it for different products and all that sort of stuff. This is the kind of stuff I do all the time. I do have a relationship with TechSource Systems. I picked them when I was picking a partner in freeze drying because, in my opinion, they make the best systems. I don't mess around with the second best or the third best or the cheapest. I only want the best because it's a lot easier to sell. So I help them sell, I help them market, but I also do a lot of engineering for them. A great deal of what I do is I just get on the phone on Zoom sessions or whatever with customers to help them work through their data, how to optimize their process, how to tweak it for this product as opposed to that product. They've got some problem they want to fix. Like, for example, there was a customer who was doing mangoes, and their mangoes came out nice and sweet and crunchy and orange and beautiful, but they didn't taste like mango. They just tasted like sort of standard sweet nothing. Well, it turns out that the aromatics that make the mango taste like the mango, if any of you have had COVID where you lost your sense of smell, you know without smell, you have nothing, right? All you have is sweet, bitter, salty. So it's because when you get your freeze dryer at the end of process and your pressure is too low and your temperature is too high, all those aromatics are coming out of the product and they end up in your ice. So by tweaking their system a little bit, by just changing some of the parameters, suddenly their mango tasted like mango again. So these are the kind of things that I can help with. I just answer the phone, so please feel free to call me. I have a pocket full of cards, so if you want my card at the end of session, just come and get one. But you can find me online at Suntour too. Okay, I'm going to just blaze on, but let's try to get this. I'll just try to blaze through this quickly. The first thing is why freeze dry? If you're here, you probably already know the answer to that question, but if you're just thinking about, well, Jesus, is this something I should do? Biggest reason to get into freeze-dried product is because your margins should be higher. If I go to a farmer and I buy an apple for $1 a pound and I air dry it or I dehydrate it, I can probably sell it for $5 a pound. If I freeze dry it, I can sell it for $50 to $60 a pound. That's a step change in margin. Of course, you have to sell it the right way, and it costs a little bit more to make it. But your margins are what's driving this business. It's not just apples. It's pet treats, right? People are taking blood from the ducks that they're slaughtering and they're freeze drying the blood, and suddenly no one ever wanted that before. It was just fertilizer. Now suddenly it's real pet treats, right? People want these products. Things that you thought were not good suddenly are good. Who the heck wants to feed their dog fish bones? Well, when they're freeze-dried, suddenly they're really crumbly and they make great nutrition, right? So that's why you freeze dry. Another one, there's a lot of people who want to make the food supply more secure. I don't think I need to explain that. Help the world spread the love, right? Because freeze-dried product is good. So I've got this story where early this year in Atlanta, we were at a trade show, and I always make stuff to hand out to give to people. And there was this guy who brought his 5 sons, 17, 15, 13, 12, and whatever. And the youngest one kept coming back to the booth, not for the freeze-dried Skittles and the Sprees. He wanted the apple chunks that I did at home. He wanted the apple chunks because he's like, that's better than candy. And they are better than candy. So, and it's a high barrier to entry. Now look, a lot of people think that's a bad thing, but if you're in the business, that's a great thing. You don't want it to become saturated. We saw that happen with candy, so everyone who's done candy knows why that's a problem. So, you can freeze dry your own product. And we already heard from some people who freeze dry their own product. You'll hear from more. Meaning you're going to sell you the stuff that you make. Or you can freeze dry other people's product. Meaning that you become that co-packer. So that's 2 roads to profitability. So if you're going to do your own product, retail or wholesale, you have to figure out. By retail, I mean selling direct to consumer. Because so this is probably the wrong word. Right? Because people here are talking about retail as being, it's in the retail store. To me, that's wholesale. You're selling it to someone else to sell, right? You're only going to get half the price if you're selling wholesale. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing. You can get you can sell a lot more, right? If you're wholesale. Okay? So, let's just please. If you're going to freeze dry small batches, you can get small. You should really start small, just like everyone's talking about, right? Start small. Get yourself a Blue Alpine or a Stay Fresh or something like that, right? I like Blue Alpine, that's the one I have. Do your proof of concept. It costs you a few $1,000s. If you're in business, a few $1,000s is chump change. It's just like, it's like the ante on table stakes, right? If you're really talking about business, $300,000 is a fair chunk of change, but $3,000 is nothing. So get yourself a little freeze dryer, make some of your product, and then make some other product, and make another product. Make all kinds of different products and find the one that when you eat it, your toes curl. You know, like I was watching the keynote this morning, and you know that the reactions of people, I have to try this stuff now.
Right.
To me, that looks like that's toe curling stuff, right? So try it and get it some to market. Go down to the farmer's market. It's a great place to start. And here's why you should do some of your own direct marketing at first. Because when somebody comes into your booth and they try your stuff, they'll say, that's remarkable. Oh, you make really great stuff. And you know that they don't mean it, right? But when they come into your booth and they try something, they're like, wow, or wow, that's really interesting. And they walk away and they come back 5 minutes later and they want to buy your stuff. Now you know you've got something. I was at a trade show last year and there was a guy from Cabo San Lucas who's doing freeze-dried mangoes. And he had some samples. And there was a girl that came into the booth while he was talking to me and he gave her a freeze-dried mango. She followed him 300 yards down the aisle as he was going, saying, where can I buy yours? I want to buy some. He's like, sorry, these are just samples. I don't have any. So you will find out. You will know when you have a good product. So do your small production, however you have to do it in order to get some. When to upgrade to a commercial machine? I mean, there's several topics, lots of people talking about this. But the number one thing is, as soon as you can make payments, as soon as your business can afford payments on a commercial machine, you should be looking at getting that commercial machine because they take time to get. And if you don't have that production, when that person comes by your stall, your booth, or they find your product and they say, hey, I love your stuff. I've got 23 stores in 3 states. I want 10,000 units per week, per month. And you're like, oh, I can't. Sorry, right? And that's, by the way, when you start looking for a co-packer who can help you out with that too, right? Because there's co-packers, just ask, right? I can help you with that. Just let me know. I can make recommendations. But you should buy a commercial freezer. You should order one when you can afford the payments. If you have a facility that you can power it up with. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. Oh, this touchpad just drives me nuts. Did I skip something important? You need a facility that's large enough, not just for current, but what you want to grow into. And you need to have more than just the freeze dryer. You need to have storage because you're going to get a bunch of raw material. You got to put it somewhere. Before you cook it, before you prep it, before you freeze it, you got to have it somewhere. And then you have to have some place to prep it. Unless you're ordering it already IQF. IQF stands for individually quick frozen. You buy that bag of frozen peas. All the peas are separate aggregate, right? You can pour out a few. That's what IQF stands for. It's slang in the industry. You can buy it that way. There's people that'll sell it to you that way. It costs a little bit more, but it saves you on some of these other steps, the prep, the cleaning, the freezing, all that sort of stuff. But you still, even if you get it IQF, you're going to need a freezer. If you're going to do any kind of level of production, it better be a walk-in freezer. Because the reach-ins, they just don't freeze very well. They don't have enough circulation to get that heat out in the reasonable amount of time. And there's two things you need to look at in a freezer. You need to look at what temperature it goes down to, but you need to look at the capacity, right? Capacity is how much heat can it pull out in a certain amount of time. Because a freezer might get down to minus 20, but if it has very little capacity and you put 100 pounds of food in there, that's not going to get to minus 20 until 5 days from now. If it has enough capacity, it'll get you to minus 20 in 5 hours. So you got to know. And if you don't know what your capacity needs to be, just give me a call. I'm an engineer. That's easy stuff for me. You need to be able to contain your freeze dryers. Most importantly, you have to be able to power up your freeze dryer. For big commercial freeze dryers, you should be looking for a facility that's got 480 volts. 480 volts, three-phase. If you got a motor that's more than 5 horses, you're into three-phase. You can do that with 208. But if you get a 50-horse motor, if you're not in 480 volts, all of your electrical equipment is really big. Your conductors have to be really fat. All your control boxes have to be swimming pool-sized control boxes. It's really expensive. Now, if you have a facility that already has 208, but you need 480 power to get some component in, you're not dead in the water, right? You can get a local step-up transformer, put it next to your panel, and then drive your 480 panel from that. It'll cost you $10,000, $15,000 for the step-up transformer, whereas it will cost you hundreds of thousands to get 480 to your facility. And I know there's some people in this room that already know that. You'll need things like compressed air drains, right? Don't forget drains, because you're going to be melting off water. You have a harvest rate, you have a Blue Alpine, it's a few pounds. 3 gallons maybe is going to come out, maybe 5 gallons. You have a commercial freeze dryer, a big freeze dryer is going to produce 2,000 to 2,500 pounds of water per day. Distilled water. Distilled water, so it's really clean. It's got some aromatics in it usually, so it'll smell like apples or it'll smell like meat. It's good if it smells like apples. It's not as good if it smells like meat. But it's distilled water. You put it through a activated carbon filter, and it's not going to smell like meat anymore. And then you can use it as distilled water. So don't forget that water that's coming out of your freeze dryer is clean. Right? That's a usable resource. But don't forget drains. You might need forklifts and all kinds of stuff. So these are things you're going to have to plan in. And I'm trying not to repeat what we've already heard. Okay. So, what steps do you need to do in order to start building a business plan? First of all, you have to make the choice that this is what you really want to do. We've had several people talk about that, and they say you got to have passion. I say that's bullshit. No one ever has passion all these CEOs, right? The like Barbara Walters or whoever says, what's the secret to success? They say, well, you got to have passion, right? Well, I don't have that. I'm screwed. Right? You have to be obsessed, though, right? You have to be dedicated, and you have to be willing to come back day after day. And you know what happens when obsession is met with action? It's called passion, right? When you have somebody that's obsessed about something that they just keep droning on and about, but they don't ever do anything about it, you say, that guy's obsessed, like, go away. But when you have somebody that's obsessed about something, they are just making it, right? They're making stuff with that's obsession. We call that passion. So that's how you get it. Choose your product. You're going to have to choose your product. This is like early on step. Now, you don't necessarily have to zero in on one because you can start to do proof of concept. We already talked about that, but you got to get there, right? So get your little freeze dryer. Do some product. Take it out to the market and test it. Choose your product. Choose your location. We talked about that. By the way, location includes moving to a different state. Think about it, right? We're not plants. Some states are a lot more expensive to operate in than others. Another thing that's very important to think about location is, where the hell am I going to get the source material for my product? It's okay when you're buying 10 or 50 pounds or 100 pounds or 1,000 pounds at a time. What happens when you need 10,000 pounds per day? Right? You're talking about 300,000 pounds a month maybe. 250,000 pounds a month. You need to have a source of product that's going to go into your freeze dryer. Sometimes you can find co-packers or co-manufacturers that have that source. They're the people that have the fish farm or the slaughterhouse or the orchard. Those are people that are probably going to get you the best product for the best price. So if you're looking for a co-packer, see if you can find somebody that is a farmer maybe, or a rancher, or a meat packer that maybe is tacking this on. Or maybe you are a farmer or a meat packer or a rancher or something like that. Then now you're talking, because now you have the source. I've talked to people with orchards all the time. There's a guy in Alabama who's starting up a slaughterhouse. He said, what am I going to do with all these offcuts, right? The cheeks and the skin and the hooves and the blood. Well, he found out that pet treats are a pretty darn good way to move that product. So he has a huge supply. Adding a freeze drying line is a great idea. And then, of course, the lady we just listened to talked all about this. I highly recommend you become friends with that lady. By the way, at this conference, become friends with lots of people, because even if you're just like trying to do the same thing, just talking with each other about your own like war stories that's magic. Define your purpose. Why am I starting this business? Why do I want to do this business? If you don't know your purpose, it's going to be harder to stick to it. Maybe that is, hey, I want to make the food chain a little steadier, a little safer. I want to be able to provide food to disaster zones. I want to be able to supply food. We've got, I don't know, they say it's like 30% of all the food that gets put on the shelf in the grocery store, like all the produce, is thrown out. And that doesn't include just produce, it's also meats, right? So I've been talking to some people. I talk to all kinds of clients if you haven't got that. Some are like people who go to stores and stuff, and they get the surplus of stuff that's about to expire, and then they donate it to food banks, not just in the United States, but in other countries too. Well, but if it's perishable food that's about to perish, and you're sending it to a country that doesn't have reliable refrigeration because they don't have reliable power, what do? Freeze dry it. Define the purpose. What unfilled needs does this make? How will this evolve over time? And then make yourself an elevator pitch. You know, the guys that were at the keynote this morning, the Wildberry, they had a great elevator pitch by the time they got into the Shark Tank, well before they got there. How did they get to Shark Tank and all the other opportunities that they created? They developed over time a really good elevator pitch. And what I mean by that is, I can tell you what my business is about in 3 sentences. Because people are going to ask you all the time, what are you doing? What is your business? Hi, my name is Gene. What do you do? Elevator pitch. My name is Andy. I make some of the best tasting apples on the planet. What do you mean? Oh, well, I take already good apples and I turn them into something that's better than candy. Oh, really? You cut me samples. I really want to try some of that, that wild berry stuff. I can't wait. His reaction, man, I was like, oh, I got to try that stuff. And use everything, right, that you've heard at this conference, all the stuff we talked about to make your elevator pitch. Figure out what your purpose is. Define what it is that you want to do. Pick your product. Make people's toes curl. And then use that to make your elevator pitch. Now, you have to start doing some of the work of your business plan, right? So that elevator pitch, by the way, is the top line of your business plan. That's the top line of your business plan. Because when you go to a financer, when you go to an investor or something, it's like the top of your resume, right? Some people say, I'm seeking this position. If the top line of your resume is that I'm seeking this position, you have the wrong top line on your resume. Your top line on your resume should say, this is what I am, and this is why I will bring value to you, right? So if you have a resume that doesn't say that, fix it. Then you're going to have to start doing the work about how to build this business plan. You need to determine what equipment you want. How do you do that? Well, first, you're just going to imagine, I have this building. It's a certain size. How am I going to get my product in the door, into prep, and then you have to get it to your freeze dryer. You need footprint for your freeze dryer. There's the actual amount of space that your freeze dryer, the physical thing, takes up. But then you have to have space around it. You have to have space to load it. You have to have space to get the cabinet open, to get into the vacuum pump or the refrigeration. If you have got a control panel on the side, like on a commercial unit, by law, you have to have enough room to swing that panel all the way open. So if it's a 3-foot panel, you got to have 3 foot of space on the side of that panel so it will go all the way open. It's electrical code. If you don't do it and somebody comes in, the fire marshal, you're shut down. And by the way, any OEM that's worth their salt will tell you this. They'll already have a footprint diagram that shows what you need. Which takes me back to another thing. The best place to find out answers to all these questions is from the people who make the stuff. They know more about their stuff than anyone else on the planet. So ask the OEM. Don't just ask one. Ask all of the OEMs that are like in the running. Ask them. They'll talk your ear off if you let them. And if they can't talk your ear off, if they can't answer your questions, then maybe you should put a black mark on that one, right? If they don't know their own stuff, then maybe they're not the best OEM. And there's, just like in any business, there's a spectrum of suppliers. Go with the best. And I didn't address this in my presentation, but that's another thing. These machines pay for themselves, right? You don't pay for a production machine. The production machine pays for the production machine. And it pays for the labor. And it pays for the footprint. And it pays for the power. And it pays for your overheads. It pays for the whole thing, or you won't be in business. So at the end of the year, when your ROI is break even, because most machines in freeze drying business these days, as long as you maintain your margins on your product, it's a 1 year or lower ROI break even, right? In 1 year, your machine's paid off. If you're buying a Blue Alpine, you could have it paid off in 2 weeks, just like what Josh was saying earlier, right? Or maybe it was Steve. I don't know. Somebody was talking about 3 weeks, paid off. When you're at that 1 year mark and your machine is paid off, you're going to forget about the fact that you saved $300,000 on your $1 million machine because it's paid off. But if you have to reach in and pull out trays with a reach rod, or your employees have to lift big-ass trays that are heavy and wobbly and stuff and to shove them into the freeze dryer, or you have to have tons and tons of infrastructure just to get your stuff around, like they're on monorails and all kinds of stuff, or it's hard to get the amount of product, or it doesn't work as well as it's supposed to because the refrigeration is under capacity, you're going to be stuck with that. You saved $300,000, but now you would have also been paid off at that year-end point with the more expensive machine, but now you have a machine that your employees really like using because it works. That it's easy to handle, it's easy to program, it's got lots of controllability. Just keeping that in mind. And one more thing about that, if you're selecting a vendor because it's a shorter lead time, you're using the wrong criteria. Because usually the long lead items are the big commercial machines are long lead items. You're talking 6-7 months. I don't know of any major commercial freeze dryer manufacturer that's less than 6 months. And if they are, watch out. All I say is buyer beware. Find out what you're buying. Sometimes you can get a good deal because they had a customer cancel halfway through the order. It's your lottery day, right? You win. Used freeze dryers can work, but you darn well better know how to operate and maintain that freeze dryer. You better have a little bit of experience under your belt, and you better have a really darn good refrigeration guy. If you're going to be in this business, by the way, have a good refrigeration guy. Find one and make friends, because there's 4 major components on a freeze dryer. You've got the refrigeration system. You've got the vacuum chamber, which includes, it's like the chamber with the heated shelves. You've got the vacuum system, and then you have the control system. That's your 4 major systems. Of all of those 4, the refrigeration is the one that's going to give you the most grief. And it's not going to be once. There's a customer in Utah who says he's got 10 Bitzer compressors, and he replaces 4 every year. 4 of them burn up every year. Now, that's not normal, but he's in Utah where it gets really hot in the summertime, and maybe his circulation isn't quite right, or maybe the people who built that systems don't provide the right kind of cooling. Your refrigeration is going to leak. You're going to have refrigerant problems. Your refrigeration will be your number one problem. And if you try buying a machine that goes to minus 60 or minus 80 degrees instead of minus 40, here's why, by the way, minus 40 is usually your first cutoff, because a single stage refrigeration compressor can get to minus 40 all by itself. Just put the right refrigerant in. If you want it to get colder than that, you're talking about multi-stage compressors, or what's called a cascade system, where you have one refrigeration system that's cooling the other refrigeration system. You can get down to minus 80, minus 100 with that. But now you have 2 refrigeration systems that have to work in perfect balance. And I don't know of anyone who has a cascade system who doesn't have a very good relationship with a refrigeration guy. And they're just expensive, and they're hard to keep going. By the way, if you're in food, you never need to go less than minus 40. You don't even need to go to minus 40. Minus 30 is actually good enough. Harvest Right and Blue Alpine, they're like minus 25 Fahrenheit. That's like minus 30 C. That's cold enough, right? Minus 40 is good because you can get your product drier a little bit faster at the end, right? There's different stages of freeze drying. I would just have to get into the weeds to go into that, but please, if you want to know more, I don't know. There's really no questions that I can't answer on that kind of stuff. Don't go for a machine that goes colder just because it goes colder. Well, it's like there was this movie called Spinal Tap. I don't know if anyone's seen it, right? There's this guy that's a guitar player. He goes, I have an amp that goes to 11. And the guy's like, well, what difference does that make? He goes, you don't understand. It goes to 11. It's a really good amp because it goes to 11. He's like, all right. It's the same thing, right? Don't engineering stuff that doesn't matter. So what machines do you need? You need coolers, right, to store your fresh stuff before you process it, right? You need your cooking if you're going to do cooked product. This might not apply to you, but if you're going to cook, you need it. You're going to need a freezer. If you're freezing your stuff inside your freeze dryer, you're using the wrong component, right? You're using a very expensive component to do a very cheap process, and you're wasting a whole bunch of production time to do it. And in production, time is money. If you're at home and you're just doing it to put stuff in your cupboard, fine. It's no problem. But if you're wasting 4 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours to get your stuff frozen in your freeze dryer, that's expensive. There's nothing more expensive than production time. So do it in a freezer. No, if you're not doing it that way, good news. First, upgrade to your process. Pre-freeze your product in a freezer. If you have a little system like Blue Alpine, just get a little chest freezer. Get some extra trays. Some people even have these like stands that you can like make a whole stack of trays. Get something like that.
I'm so sorry for the silly question, and that does not affect sublimation in any way.
No. No.
Speeds it up.
Your stuff has to be frozen before you start freeze drying. Before you add heat to your system, your product must be frozen. So, by the way, and we'll go on, I'm going to address your question in more detail in a little bit. That's a great question. Okay, you're also going to need prep tables, right, to prepare your product, but you're also going to need prep tables to package your product or to weigh it out and that sort of stuff after it comes out. And you're going to need scales, whether automatic or manual. Or you can get these machines that have these like vibrators, and they have like a gate, right? Because you're doing aggregate product, right? So the gate goes up and the vibrator vibrates your stuff down this track, and then the gate will go shut whenever the hopper gets whatever number of grams you want in it. And it's just sitting in that hopper, and then there'll be a little foot switch. You just hold your bag up to it, foot switch, dumps in, right? Now you can get machines that do the whole thing, right? They pick up the bag, open the bag, vibrates, hopper, it does the whole thing, and then it even seals it and then melts it shut and puts it in a box for you. Eventually, you're going to need to get there, by the way. If you get to the product where you're doing 1,000 packages a day or something like that, or even 300 maybe, you might be thinking about getting a packaging machine. But there's a lot of steps. Packaging machines not nearly as expensive as freeze dryers. Not nearly as expensive. Forklift. You should think about, am I going to need a forklift for my product? And forklift is something that you can find used, and I highly recommend you do. Or if you've got a tractor, get forklift attachment for it. That's what I have at home. You might need a compressor. Like if you have a packaging machine, you're probably going to need compressed air for it. Some of the vacuum pumps will need compressed air. Like any of the larger systems are going to need compressed air. Larger commercial systems are going to have air-operated valves, so you're going to need compressed air. It doesn't, for a small operation, you don't need a big compressor, but for a big operation, you need a bigger compressor. It's something to think about. And don't forget your tray washer. Right, a dishwasher can't handle big, full-sized baking trays for the most part. Most of them can't. So be careful when you're buying a tray washer, because there's people out there that'll sell you a benchtop washer that'll do trays, and they want $75,000 for it. And then there's another tray washer that'll do 40 trays, and they want $7,500 for it. So there's a huge umbrella of price ranges and stuff on dishwashers. Just be careful when you're looking at that kind of stuff. Make a footprint map. Get yourself, draw a piece of paper, draw out your facility. If you already have a facility, then you already know what to start with. If you don't have a facility, just take all this equipment, get the footprints, and put it into the workflow, and then that will help you decide, what size building do I need? Not just for now, but for the future. Conform to your building, or confirm what you need. And then make a utility spreadsheet. Utility is so important. These are power-hungry machines, right? Some of your freeze dryers that have liquid heated shelves can use gas to provide that heat. You pay a lot. You pay more for those machines. I'm not really sure that. There's trade-offs, right? Liquid heated shelves, you have one point of control. You can control the temperature of the fluid going in. And you can control how fast it goes in. But that's the one thing that you can control. Electric heat, often it has multi-zone control, so it can adapt to, like, because you can't put your product in there uniformly. Some trays are going to be loaded heavier than others. So your machine needs to be able to adapt and put more thermal power to the places that need it more. So, but there's trade-offs on both. But if you have a liquid heated shelves, you can actually use gas to heat it, and sometimes you can even recycle heat. So there's advantages there. So put together a utility spreadsheet. Everyone's utility is going to be different, right? Just look up what your utility cost is. Figure out how many kilowatts does this take. My system needs 100 kilowatts on average. It's going to run for 24 hours. That's 2,400 kilowatt hours. Everyone's power is metered in kilowatt hours. A certain number of cents per kilowatt hour. Just multiply the numbers together. 2,400 kilowatt hours times 10 cents is $240 per day. Very simple. That'll tell you how much money you're going to have to spend. Defining your costs for starting up a business. Get machinery quotes from whoever is viable, whoever the OEMs are that you want to approach. OEMs are your best place to get information, right? We talked about that. Make sure you include shipping and installation, because shipping is a charge, but installation costs can be a big charge, right? But if you have a big complex machine, that installation cost is well worth the money. You just need to make sure you plan it in. It's more than worth the money. It's like when you get that flat pack from IKEA and you have to figure out how to put it together. That's simple stuff. Figuring out how to put together a complex machine, get it all started, charged with fluid and the electrics and the networking and all that sort of stuff, it's more complex. Have your professionals come do that for you, and then they'll train you. They'll train you on how to use it. But you got to bake that into your costs. Get quotes from your utilities. Now I've heard horror stories from certain clients that this didn't happen to them, but their neighbors got a quote for like $80,000 for the utility upgrade, but then when the utility was done, they charged them $1.2 million. I don't know what you do then. What the hell do you do? Make sure you get your quotes in writing for the utilities. I've just heard horror stories about utility companies, so make sure you do it right. And then you just put all these costs into a spreadsheet. Now, if you've seen my videos and you've seen the ones where I do the ROI calculations, if you want those spreadsheets, just send me an email, I'll send them to you. If you haven't watched my video, there's one that's called a business startup plan, and there's another one called Can You Really Make 6 Figures Freeze Drying, and it's actually 6 figures per month, right? So both of those have me doing ROI calcs for the actual machines. It shows just a sample how you calculate ROI on these various things. If you want that spreadsheet, or both of them, just send me an email. And then you should always, nowadays, leverage your AI chatbot. Say, hey, I'm starting up a business doing this. What things should I be considering? Because it's going to give you a 2-page dissertation. Just read through it and see if there's something you missed, because there probably is. That doesn't mean that's the, oh, hey, make me a business plan, right? And that's the business plan. But use it to help you. People say AI is going to replace human, but that's not really what's going to happen. It's going to help you do your job better and easier and be more thorough. I've got a client in Idaho who is going to start a business with many large machines, and he used Claude, and he's got a business plan that just makes my head spin. This guy's kind of detail oriented. He knew he was going to go raise capital from investors, which he did, and he's like, I know what they're going to ask. So he just kept refining it. And every time he needed a change, he just asked Claude to change it for him. He didn't have to go and do all the work. So leverage it. It's not really as intimidating as you might think. Okay? If you don't know me or my channel, reach out or just go to YouTube and search for Suntour and you'll find me. I got about 25 videos or so, and I'll be doing more. It's an educational channel that focuses on the science, the equipment, and the business. And I've even got a couple of them out there that says, why did I do this? Why did I start this business? Which are actually kind of good. So, all right, that's what I got. So now we can answer any questions you've got. Yes.
So when you're saying you should be able to pay off like an industrial machine in about a year if your margins are right,
Yeah.
what kind of margins would you recommend aiming for?
Well, so I sat in with Stephen Cohen earlier today, and he was talking about direct to consumer, and he said that Amazon all in is 25%. I was already baking in on my ROI calculations 40%, because when the last time I was selling stuff on Amazon, it was 30% for the pleasure of doing business with Amazon and 10% for fulfillment. But now he said it's 20% for the pleasure of doing business and 5%. All in, everything, 25%. So if you do direct to consumer, you can easily determine what kind of price you should be getting for your product by going to Amazon and searching for your product and finding, like, freeze-dried apples. Almost all freeze-dried fruit is going to go for about $60 a pound. If you do you look at the ounces and you do the math, it almost always comes out to $60 to $65 a pound. If you can sell direct to consumer, you're going to pay off your machine very quickly. If you put your stuff on store shelves, like what Josh Kingdon, the Sweet Potato Awesome guy, does, it's going to be a big struggle, because those, just like he said, they're all going to take their cut. And the stores are apparently kind of hard to work with. So choose your places carefully. You can actually figure out what you need to defend as a margin by working backwards. Say, I've got these are all my bills, and you should try to figure out all of them, including paying yourself. Right? In my business, I always figure in my own wages. Maybe I don't pay myself as much as I ought to. And by that way, that business plan that you did where you tabulate all those costs, then you need to divide that into your pounds. Say, okay, if my costs are this, how much per dry pound do I need to charge to make my margins? And you need to make money. And you should amortize, if you want a 1 year ROI, amortize your payments across 1 year. Split up take the total machine cost. Say you're going to buy the new Blue Alpine XL in January, right? It's coming out in January. It's going to be like $13,000 or whatever. Okay, that's $1,000 a month, right? You need to amortize it across 1 year. Now you know you're paid off in 1 year.
The challenging thing though is trying to project, like I know what my costs are today, but what would they be in a bigger facility with a bigger machine? Like ingredient costs might go down, but my overhead's going to go up. So trying to project those numbers has been really hard.
Yeah, that's actually what's on that spreadsheet. So the magic is that you're making way more pounds. And so you divide that into a lot more pounds. You're actually going to get better. The larger the machine, the lower your cost is. And it's actually dramatic. What's the big cost that lowers is labor. If I've got a whole room full of small freeze dryers, I'm probably going to have 6 to 10 employees to take care of it. If I have one big freeze dryer, I can probably leverage 2 to 3, depending on how much it takes to load it, how much prep work you have. That's a big delta, right? Because a half a dozen employees, I mean, that's going to cost you $500,000 a year probably or something. I don't know, it's a lot. So yeah, as you go bigger, and you can see that in the ROI calcs, you actually get more margin than less. It's a little scary though, right? Because now you're faced with laying out the $500,000 or $750,000 or $1 million for a big machine, right? That's the scary part. So, but you don't have to go there right away. You can build up to it. The small freeze dryers, like the Harvest Rights, the Blue Alpines, the Stay Freshes, the Waves, the Cut-ins, right? They've all got smaller machines. Some of them are going to be on display upstairs. TechSource is going to have a smaller machine, right? So they're interim steps. Yes. Oh yeah, that one will be upstairs. That's the TechSource new machine that's going to be on display upstairs.
Have you learned
Yes, I actually have heard some data from preliminary runs, and there was a run that was done with 80 pounds of water, just to see how well it can handle that water capacity, and it was done in 17 hours, and all the ice was, so that's actually really good. The pressure never went above 700 millitorr, even though that's a huge load on a freeze dryer, right, to do pure water. Because, okay, so let me back up. Once you pump out your chamber of all the air, all that's left in there that's going to create pressure is the water vapor. And where's that water vapor going to come from? Your product. So as you put heat in those shelves, you're going to create steam, really cold steam. That's going to create pressure in your chamber. So if you've got refrigeration capacity that can pull that moisture out of your system and put it in the ice, that helps your pressure stay low. The lower your pressure, I want to say this correctly. The better your refrigeration capacity, the lower that pressure will be maintained even as you put more and more heat into your system. The only way you can vaporize water is by putting the heat in. You can draw a vacuum on it and it'll boil a little bit, but then it will stop boiling as soon as it doesn't have heat. In fact, you can boil water all the way to ice without putting any chilling on it, right? If you got a little freeze dryer, just put a little dish of water in there and just pull vacuum on it, and you'll watch it boiling, and then eventually it'll turn into ice. And then that ice will get colder and colder and colder until it comes down to whatever the vapor pressure is in that chamber. If you get down to 100 millitorr in your chamber with that little vial of ice in there, that ice will be minus 40 C without putting any refrigeration on it whatsoever. Just pulling vacuum. That's evaporative cooling. So it takes 533 times more energy to boil a gram of water than it does to change that gram of water by 1 degree C. 533 times more energy to boil it than to change the temperature. So when you boil it and there's no heat, it's taking the heat from all the surrounding water. That's why the temperature plummets until it freezes and so on. So the preliminary indications are that that's going to be a fantastic commercial machine. So, and that's the company that I work with because, like I said, I just think that they've got the best stuff. But you can talk to the guys up there; they can show you all about the machine. Yes. Who else? What?
In one of your videos, which I went looking for, I couldn't find, you said what the best apples were. Can you touch on that again? Because we did one batch of apples that was delicious, and we did another batch, and they were like, bleh.
So the best apples I've ever done are Honeycrisp.
Okay.
The Honeycrisp and the second best was Cosmic Crisp. They're actually fairly similar. The Fujis were pretty good. The Galas are pretty good. But this is the number one thing to think about. The better your product tastes going into the freeze dryer, the better it tastes coming out. If it's got the right acid sugar blends going in, it's going to be the same blend but intensified when it comes out. So, and this is for any product. If you're doing soups, make your soup taste as kick butt as you can. Because when you freeze dry it, somebody pours water into it out in the, on the mountaintop, you want their toes to curl. You really do. What else? You guys must have questions about the equipment itself. Oh, I have a good one. Vacuum pumps. So almost all the vacuum pumps that are sold with machines are rotary vane. I mean the small machines. Rotary vane pumps. On a rotary vane pump, you have a small cylinder inside of a larger cylinder, and it spins. And it's got these little flaps that slide in and out of this. Slide in and out. So as it spins, the vanes extend by centrifugal force, and sometimes there's even springs in there, to create a barrier between the trailing side of that fin and the advancing side. The fin is advancing on one side and trailing on the other. The trailing side is your vacuum. The advancing side is your compression. So if you put a lot of water, moisture, vapor, into that pump, water condenses at a lower temperature than what's inside that pump. I mean, actually, what I mean to say is the pump is cold enough that it will condense the water inside of it. on the compression side of that vein, because that's where your high pressure is. You get above the condensing pressure, goes back to water, liquid water. On the trailing side of that vein, right, let's say it sweeps around, now you got vacuums being pulled, now you have vacuum being pulled, that water is going to explode back into vapor. Why is that a problem? Because it's putting a vapor load on your pump. Your pump can only handle a certain amount of vapor. So if a third of that is consumed by the water that's re-exploding into steam, you just lost a third of your pumping speed. And furthermore, what temperature that water is going to limit how deep you can get in vacuum. So if you got water getting into your pump, let's say you just can't get down to the pressures that you could before, there's two reasons. One, your pump has too much water in it, or two, you have vacuum leaks. So there's this little knob on the top of your pump. It's called the gas ballast, invented 102 years ago. Well, no, it's like 112 years ago now by a guy that works for Leibold Corporation. He's dead now. But he figured out that if you add a little bit of air, we hope, if you add a little air, like 2/3 of the way through the compression cycle, it just puts enough air in there that it can open that valve at the top, because the air will push the valve open and then all the water vapor goes out with it. But if you don't put any air in there, the water condenses into water and it doesn't ever make enough pressure to open that valve, and then your pump just gets filled up with water. And your oil turns milky. By the way, if you ever see milky oil, stop running and you got to drain that oil. Yeah. No, if there's going to be a little knob on the top, and sometimes it'll say 0,1 or 0,12. Open it to 1, and that just allows a little of that air go in. Some pumps just are already built with the gas ballast automatically running, and you don't have to mess with it. But run with that open all the time. Never shut that valve. Never shut that valve. That'll keep your oil clean, or dry anyway.
An oilless unit is better or worse than an oil unit? What's the
Rotary vane, you mean the pump?
Yeah, the pump self-vacuum pump.
So this is a complicated answer, so bear with me. An oil-free pump that's that size that's being sold for that application is usually a scroll pump. So a scroll pump is, you got these two coils. One is fixed, and the other coil fits inside the other coil, and it doesn't spin, it orbits like this. And it traps pockets of gas, and it goes around the coil from the larger part of the coil to the smaller part, and just compresses it along the way, and the gas goes out the center. Well, there's these tip seals in there that between the fixed one and the moving one, you have to have something that like closes that last gap, but it allows it to rub without like wearing it to smithereens. And that tip seal wears, and it'll create dust. But the big problem with scroll pumps is that it wobbles, which is hard on the bearings. So in about 2 years, you're going to need to replace the bearings on a scroll pump. And most times, it's cheaper to buy a new pump. So I don't recommend scroll pumps, not for this application. If you're in a laboratory and you need clean, dry vacuum, or in certain specialty manufacturing cases, I would recommend that pump, but not for a small freeze dryer. I would go with a rotary vane. And if you want a really good rotary vane, Leibold makes a really good rotary vane with integrated mist filters. It's got 4 times the oil capacity of a normal rotary vane, which means it takes a lot longer for it to get dirty. It's got automatic gas ballast. It's got mist filters that are so good that you can't even see any mist. Like, when you turn your pump and your room fills with smoke? It's not really smoke. It's atomized oil. That actually will coat out on your walls, on your horizontal surfaces, and in your lungs. And your ventilation system in your house is going to pull it from that room and distribute it. So I highly recommend, if you don't get a Leibold pump, Blue Alpine sells a special filter. It's like 3 times taller. And I got one from these guys. They sent me one, and I have 0 oil smoke coming out of my pump now. But Leibold makes a really good one. It'll last a long time. In fact, there was a YouTube guy who got a pump from Leibold like 5 years ago or something like that. He's got a lot of followers. I can't remember what his name is, but he ran his Neo D16 on his like multiple harvest rates all getting together, And he ran it for 3 years and he never changed the oil once.
Off a single pump?
I don't know how he configured it exactly. I haven't seen it. But if you want to run multiple freeze dryers on a single central vacuum system, you cannot use one pump. Don't try that. You will destroy your product, because when you go to pump down another chamber, all that gas will actually flow backwards into your other chamber and cause high pressure, and you'll have melt back. You got to do it in a certain way. Just get a hold of me. I'll help you with that if you need that.